Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stober. Disasters are unexpected events spelling catastrophe. They may be natural or man-made. Now, throughout time, man has had to cope with managing various forms of disaster. Now, organized society, taking cognizance, has developed safety measures and response regimes to avoid and mitigate the impact of disasters when they occur. Today, we'll be talking about the management of crises, disasters, and risks. My guest is the Director General of the Emergency Crisis Disaster Risk Management Institute, an international center and recognized professional body in building capacity in the management of emergencies, crises, and risks. Let's welcome Chuks Akawo. Chuks, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, we've just said that disasters are events that are unexpected, and they may be natural, maybe man-made. Is it possible, let's start from this context, is it possible to have life completely without disasters, crises, and risks?
Definitely not. But let me use this opportunity to first and foremost appreciate the DG, NTA, and the management team for this opportunity to be here. Is a rare opportunity that I can never take for granted, as well as the Institute. So I appreciate him. Then back to your question, sir. We cannot live without it. We have humanitarian crises. We have natural disasters. These are disasters that man has no control over. Okay? So man has no control over natural disasters. What we only do is how can we prevent it and mitigate the impact of it, so that when it happens, it will not have that severity is reduced. That's the highest we can do. And there's also other areas which are human-induced disasters, which we create by our activities, in action and actions of men on the environment. That also triggers disasters. So that can be minimized. But as far as natural disaster is concerned, we live with it. The only thing we do is how best we can control it, we can prevent it, we can mitigate it, and reduce the impact.
All right, that's speaking about the natural disasters, we can't do anything about. But as you've also said, there are so many other disasters that occur as a result of the activities of man and his environment, and of course the various conflicts in society, which leads to crisis situations and disasters, like what Nigeria is facing. Many parts of the world are coping with that. But let's first of all look at the question of natural disasters. People have said in these parts of the world, Nigeria particularly, we're lucky in that the natural disasters have not been at the scale we've seen in other parts of the world in the West. I mean, things like tornadoes, earthquakes, and huge floodings. Yes, we have floods all over the time, but mostly what happens in our cities would be put down to blocked drains and again the activities of man. But let's look at that. Is it fair to say, well, we've been spared serious natural disasters in this part?
Definitely we have, and we have our own fair share of it, in as much as we don't have the same impact on them across the globe, Europe and other nations. But we still have our own fair share of natural disaster, which is commonly among us is flooding. It's annually. Okay. But what we need to do is annual disaster that do occur. How best have we managed this? How best have we managed it? Do we have the capacity to just manage this flooding? Do we have the capacity? And the same event, the same thing will be occurring every year. How best have we managed it as a nation? How best have we been able to manage it? It's not just about providing relief. How best have we been able to manage it? By reducing the impact of it.
All right. Okay, we'll come to that, but let's go back to the one that's caused by the activities of humans, things that impact on the environment, and, of course, wars, conflicts in society, which lead to humanitarian crises. These are within the purview. These are things that man can do something about. These are things that Nigeria can do things about. I want you to look at that and also have at the back of your mind what we face annually with fires and things like that. Those are disaster situations too. And sometimes you find that it occurs out of carelessness, not adhering to safety guidelines. Let's talk about those ones that, can be controlled.
Humanitarian crisis can be controlled if there is justice, equity in the society. It can be controlled because this triggers, when there's injustice, when there's inequity, it triggers conflict. And once that is triggered, we begin to experience what we're experiencing today as a nation. So the best thing we can do as a nation, we don't have any other nation than this. So we must come together and build this nation. Equity must be our hallmark. Justice must be our hallmark. That will reduce conflict. Everybody, every citizen of this nation should have that sense of belonging, that this is our nation. We don't have any other nation than this. If it's destroyed, I don't know where we can go to.
Okay, let's look at one of the biggest issues Nigeria faces today, the insurgency and banditry. And this has led to crises and humanitarian crises, especially in those places that are faced with the insurgency. Yes, Nigeria fought a civil war a long time ago and came out of it. But would you say that the experience of that war prepared the country for the management of what we now face, which is an insurgency, which is quite different from what it had then? And how has the country managed the crises emanating from the insurgency?
I think from my own perspective, from the civil war, I was not born then, but I knew that with what we're experiencing today, we have not been able to bring to table. We have not been able to put to table that experience. We have not, as a nation. So this insurgency, these are man-created, human-induced disasters or crises that can be reduced, that can be eliminated. We have porous borders all across this nation, that anyone, anywhere across our neighboring nations can access. What are we doing? How many manpower do we have to man all these porous borders? What are we doing about proliferation of arms, small arms into this nation? You can easily bring arms through any of all these outlets to this nation. There are some people that are working living in this nation from other neighboring countries. No documentation, nothing. What are we doing about this? So what we just need to do as a nation is to go back to the drawing board. Call all the critical stakeholders together and sit down and work this nation. We need to work together to achieve where the best that is expected of this nation. We, just like I said earlier on, if it's destroyed, we don't have any other nation to run to. Nigeria have been a big brother to so many nations of the earth. How are we relating with them today? What are the relationship of Nigeria with those nations? Not to talk of when we don't have any nation, if we are refugees in those areas, how would they handle us?
Now let's look at the environment. And if you go to the areas where, oil exploration is carried out, one of the biggest issues you face is pollution. And this is also an activity of humans. And so Nigeria today has a serious challenge in the Niger Delta region where oil has been explored and, the disasters emanating from the activities of, oil exploration. How can this be handled?
Quite fortunately, I'm from the Niger Delta, and I've seen a lot of that. Oil spill, contaminations of water, and other livelihoods. As a nation, we're still using old pipelines that people can easily destroy. That's sabotage to the economic value of this nation. Do we have the capacity to keep surveillance over those pipelines? We don't have. How many people do we have? We need to have adequate surveillance over those pipelines to prevent them from busting those pipelines. And those pipelines, the ones that are busted by the activity or vandalized by the activity of man, how fast are those things? What is our rate of response to those things? Because before the response is activated, before the response agency, first response gets to those places, we have lost large quantity of crude oils. That all those oil have now flown to the land, to the water, and all that, and contaminating them. So we need to look at this to see how we can overhaul the channels of distribution of those resources from the area production to area where it's being refined.
Okay, well, I've taken you through some of those disasters and situations where Nigeria, is facing. There's still one more, and this occurs on a yearly basis, and sometimes it's out of carelessness and the activities of humans again. It has become a recurring thing every year to hear of fire disasters everywhere. Markets going up in flames, commercial areas going up in flames. Sometimes, of course, it is arson. At other times, it's inexplicable. Maybe some faulty electrical equipment somewhere. Maybe buildings are constructed without adhering to the rules. And this occurs. There's hardly any year that you do not see at least 5 or 6 major markets go up in flames.
It's quite challenging. It's quite unfortunate that we are still experiencing this in this nation. Fire disasters are preventable. It's preventable. For instance, how many of us, when you are leaving your home in the morning, how many of us make it a point of duty to remove the sockets when you are going out when you are not at home. Some do leave it when they are not around, and when there's power overflow, what happens? It bursts that and it triggers fire. Some other ones are overload sockets, do trigger fire. True. Some are running generators inside a shopping mall, and as the generator is on, they pour fuel inside that generator, which will also trigger fire. Then the other one you mentioned too is arson. Those are basic things. Poor electrical equipment, poor standard. Most of the wiring equipment are of poor standard. What are we doing to control them? We have standard organization in this nation. So they need to be up to their game and ensure that every cable, whatever they are using, is substandard and best practice and acceptable globally. Then people need also to be educated, create that awareness. Fire is not a friend, because once it happens, it affects your neighbor, it affects other persons. So they need to be educated on those tips, safety tips about fire. What are those things that triggers fire and how it can be prevented? I think they need to do that both in different languages, so that the people will know and make it a point of duty and cultivate that safety culture in us.
Well, now that we have talked on a bit of the situations that we face in Nigeria, let's come to the Emergency Crisis and Disaster Risk Management Institute. Now, this body is said to be a professional body that provides capacity building and training for Nigerians. How long has this institute been in existence?
8 years now.
Just 8 years?
Yes, 2013.
Okay. So it's safe for us to say that the work of this institute is cut out for it. It's very clear. So what does the institute provide in the face of all these disasters that the nation is facing?
Okay. First and foremost, we do organize. The institute was established primarily to promote professionalism and best practices. How do we do this? By training and retraining of professionals in the area of disaster management from time to time. So we do organize seminars, conferences, workshops from time to time on these cut out areas, on disaster management, disaster preparedness, disaster response, disaster recovery. Crisis, we do organize conferences on all this from time to time. We also have what we call Emergency Preparedness Week. That is a week cut out to create awareness about disaster preparedness. What do we need to do as a family? What do you need to have as a family? When disasters strike, will you have the capacity to sustain your family for 72 hours before help will come? So we create awareness about our programs. Then we train professionals. We train professionals on disaster management.
All right, these professionals that you train on disaster management, who might these professionals be? People from what parts?
Presently, our members are cut across the various sectors.
Okay, so when you talk of the professionals that you train, professionals in which areas, which spheres?
Mostly first responders.
Okay.
From the Federal Fire Service, from the military, from security agencies, from the oil and gas sector, and other responders. We will do organized programs for them. For instance, when we had our last program in Port Harcourt, that was July, a month ago, we have professionals from NEMA, were there, NESRA we are represented, NOSRA, the military, the paramilitary, and all that. So we always organize programs for
Now,
this.
how structured is this capacity building and these programs you talk about? Seeing that addressing the problem here is in itself an emergency, so how structured is the capacity building that you provide here?
What is normally quarterly. We have programs that are cut out quarterly. We have human capacity development programs. We have workshops. And we also have partners that we work with, both locally and internationally. And we have resource persons that are drawn from the various sectors, from the academy, from the academia, then from the private sector and responding agencies.
Let's take, for instance, the situation in the Northeast. What's the structure of the training that is required to mitigate the humanitarian crisis which has been witnessed in the northeast of Nigeria? And how involved have you been in that?
We have been involved and in it. Most time, what we do is risk management, risk communication management, creating awareness.
Okay.
Then, on conflict and crisis, we pick trading issues. We treat trading issues. Each of our programs deal with trading issues. Profile solutions, best strategies, what to do. At the end of it, we have a communique, which we do forward to the government for implementation, and we have an implementation committee that do
Let me
follow
put
up.
this to you. As an institute that undertakes to do this training and build capacity, let's look at certain specific issues. Conflicts. You know, Nigeria is replete with ethnic and sometimes religious conflicts. Now, what is the solution to these? When you look at the crisis that's been rocking parts of this country, especially when sometimes they degenerate into, ethnic confrontations, and sometimes with religious undertones, because all these contribute to the problems that you're facing in society. And this has been on. What is the response of an institute like yours? So give us your insight into how these can be ameliorated. You talked about awareness. That's beyond awareness. What else is there?
Critical stakeholders need to come together and discuss. Because when you talk of conflicts, we talk of crisis, they are triggered. You look at the main causes, the root causes of those things that triggers it, and address them. As far as it's not addressed, those issue, crises, we continue. So we as an institute have been involved in organizing critical stakeholders, dialoguing with them, discussing with them how best this can be resolved amicably, getting the critical stakeholders how best this can be resolved. So our institute have been doing that from time to time.
In a place like the North Central, how have you been able to address this issue? What's the level of collaboration you have with state governments, for instance, with local councils, and even with pressure groups, civil society groups, and the people themselves, their leaders? What is the kind of engagement you have with them?
We are trying to do that on the Northwest. We are working towards having a program there by October on the International Day for Disasters. So we want to have a program there where we can get the critical stakeholders together and dialogue with them and discuss with them, then provide solutions, come out with a communique, our solutions, and see how best we can follow up with them without engaging both the executives, the traditional rulers, the peer groups, and other critical stakeholders to ensure that we have a peaceful environment. Because if there's no peace in this nation, there will not be any development. So we need peace at all cost.
Right. I'm interested in your engagement with the traditional rulers, because many times we say that the traditional institution, the traditional leaders, are the custodians of the people's culture and the people's traditions, and but there is no specific rule assigned to them. So I'm interested in your engagement with this group of people and what you think. You think that there should be a constitutional role assigned to traditional rulers?
Yes, we are working on that, especially cutting out a clear-cut constitutional responsibility for the traditional rulers. You cannot do without that. They know the domain. They know the environment. They know who is in the environment. For instance, in my community, if once you step into my community, probably you are not an indigene. As you pass from the entrance of the community, wherever you are going to, you see some youths. They will follow you. They will trace you to the house that you are going to. So immediately you sit down in that house, they will call out the owner of the house. Is he your visitor or is he your visitor? The next thing, they will go to the traditional ruler of the community. Oh, we have a new person in our community. So they know everything about their community, and they know how to engage the youth, the women, and everyone in that community to sustain and get everlasting peace in their community. So they know their environment, they know their domain. So there must be a clear-cut constitutional responsibility, rules for the traditional rulers, because they are very pivotal in peace resolution. They are very, very important. We cannot do without them.
In recent times, we've been faced by calls for secession. You've seen groups, each one threatening to go their way. You find them in the north, you find them in the south, you find them all over the country. Groups that are springing up and preaching not unity, but disunity. How does your institute respond to that? You say, you have conflict resolution, you have, peace building as part of your agenda. How do you respond to those?
Yeah. There are bound to be crises. There are bound to be conflict as far as human beings exist. There are bound to be agitation. But the most important thing is, what are the root causes of those agitation? Have they been addressed? So we need to look at the root causes of those agitation. And bearing in mind that this is the only nation we have. And being together is our strength. Being together is our strength. So we need to be together. But I advocate that there should be devolution of powers. There should be devolution of powers so that they will be critical. Most of the responsibilities should be taken to the state. And the state should allow the local government to exist. So, in as much as we need peace, in as much as this nation, we need peace, those things must be put in place. We need, what are the root causes of this agitation? It needs to be addressed. We have to sort out all those things. Then, the issue of injustice, it should be addressed. And let every person in this nation called Nigeria have that sense of belonging. There must be equity. If it's an employment, there must be equity. Then people will have that sense of belonging, and that will help reduce agitation to the barest minimum.
Some of those things you talked about have a political bearing. Now, let's go back to governance issues. I mean, because certainly if you're going to address these, you would have to look at governance issues and the political climate. You think that what we have, after so many years of return to democracy, have we attained that level where we can look at the political structure, the parties, for instance, because these are the people who seek to have power on behalf of the people to govern or to administer the state. Have we done very well with that? Because you can see that so many crises emanate from the parties themselves who seek to hold power on behalf of the people. So are we looking at the political structure of the country?
Yeah. I think as a nation, we're evolving. In our democracy, we're evolving. A lot of things, a lot of education, people are beginning to be aware, okay? And most of the political parties are having internal crisis. Why? Because there's no internal democracy. That needs to be sorted out, okay? So that the people that want to vote will have that trust in you, that whoever that emerges is the candidate of the people and have the backing of the people to represent them in whatever capacity. So they need to do that as much as possible. Entrenching that in our political parties is very, very, especially internal democracy. It should be involved, it should be in our political parties, so that when people are voting, they will be able to vote for the best. I assume you have a candidate, and they are supporting that candidate based on the proven track record of that candidate. That candidate should not be subchanged by any system, so that they will begin to build trust. Those are triggers of crisis that we're witnessing today, because most of the representatives were not the representative of the people. So we need to work on that so that we begin to move forward as a nation. In as much as for the past few years now, we have done well as a nation. We are evolving. We'll surely get there. We're not there yet, but we'll surely get there. But those little things need to be put in place for us to get to where we are going to.
All right. You spoke about education, and I take this both formal and informal. But let's look at the formal education system. People who have said that we need an overhaul in that as well, because we should begin to inculcate in the formal school system ideas that will make for citizens who grew up to be aware of responsibility to the nation and to provide, to grow citizens who will know exactly how to conduct themselves in society and who will be conscious of nationalism. Do you think there's something missing in our education system where, in the production of citizens who identify with nationalism?
In those days, we have history. Is history taught again in our schools? No. We don't know anything again about nationalism. We don't know anything again about our founding fathers. So we need to go back to the basis. History should be brought back to our curriculum because it's very, very necessary. It's very, very necessary.
Well, government gave a green light for that some time ago, but it's still not happening?
No, we have not seen anything on that. Personally, I have not seen anything. We need to get that back, okay? Because as a nation, we have history. It's from the history we're able to learn about our forefathers, about our founding fathers, everything are there in the history of that nation. So it's very necessary, and it will help in our education. They will not talk of voters' education. It's when you are educated that we're able to know this is who I want to vote for. Okay, this is who I want to vote for, and this is what to do. If, for instance, you are not educated, can you use the present voting system? You cannot. They will say, okay, come and temperate. They will hold your hand and temperate wherever you feel like temperating. And you go. Because why? You are not educated. You don't know. So we need to know more. In our education, we need to know more. That voters' education need to be inculcated into our educational programs, so that right from the primary school to the secondary school, you should have elementary knowledge of what voters' education is all about and how you can exercise your right as a citizen. It's our right. So you must be able to exercise your right when the time comes.
Now let's go back to your relationship with regulatory bodies. Some of the disasters we spoke about, fires, flooding, oil spill, there are regulatory bodies, but sometimes it is alleged that either people do not follow the rules or the regulatory bodies themselves lack the capacity to enforce the rules. So what are we looking at here? Is it a question of legislation or enforcement? For instance, people put up buildings and don't follow the guidelines, but there are regulatory bodies that should determine if a structure should be the way it is. And the result has been very clear. Building collapse. It's another thing Nigeria has had to deal with. So what is your engagement with regulatory bodies?
On that, we are really doing that. For instance, in every of our programs and activities. And apart from that, we have what we call stakeholders, critical stakeholders engagement. We have been engaging with NEMA, we have been engaging with every other responding agencies. And as an institute too, we have what we call volunteer corps.
Good.
We have volunteer corps, trained volunteer corps as an institute that work with these responding agencies when disaster strikes or when disaster occurs. So we have that, and we have been engaging them. Then when you now talk of that, it's not somebody that gave the approval. Somebody gave the approval before that building was erected there. And those that are also building on floodplains or drainages and all that, what have happened to those people? Then those officials of those organizations that have been found culpable, what have happened to them? So we need to go back, okay? And most of all these agencies don't have the capacity, they don't have that strength to be able to, how will I put it, to bring to book most of those defaulters. So we need to re-engineer or restructure their mandate and power to be able to act.
Okay. You just mentioned something interesting now, that you also train volunteers. It's known that volunteerism is not exactly popular in Nigeria. I mean, people who offer service to help without, any compensation, without remuneration, it's not something that's very popular around here. So how has the response been when you talk about training volunteers?
It has been quite encouraging. One, we should all also know that disaster and safety is the collective responsibility of every one of us. So we must have a safer environment for us to be able to carry out our daily responsibility, to carry out our businesses and all that. So we have been, these volunteers are members. They are members that have volunteered. I'm have passion for this. I want to be involved in this. So those ones they have passion, they are committed to it. Okay, and so we get them involved, train them, and they help.
Who can be trained from, people who, maybe someone says, okay, I see what's going on in society, I'd like to contribute my little bit. Who can become one of your volunteers, and where and how do you train them to equip them with adequate knowledge? Again, you tell me about your collaboration with other organizations, but let's see, how do you get your volunteers, and what form of training do you put them through?
Our volunteers, we normally get them from our members.
Okay.
We have over 5,685 members cut across the various sectors. So we call for those that are interested.
How do they become members? How do they get to be members?
Of the institutes or volunteers?
No, the volunteers. You say your volunteers are drawn from your members.
Yes.
So how do they get to become your members in the first place?
Okay, to become a member of the institute, members are drawn from various sectors. Those first responders, those that have interest in disaster management, those that want to also build a career.
Okay, so for instance, you could go to NEMA or the fire service, for instance, and say, yes, the institute is here, it has services available to you, and anyone from those institutions can decide that they want to go further into this and become members, or
Yes.
do they become automatic members?
They become automatic members because they are trained professionals in that area.
No.
So what we just do is we ask for their documents and all that, and evaluate them and know the category, the grade they are qualified
Now, the
for.
ones who are not trained professionals, ordinary folks in society, citizens on their own, who decide that it's time to help a lending hand, how do you get them, and what kind of training do you provide for them?
We draw them from first of all, you must have to be a member. Then after being a member and you are interested, you want to join the volunteer corps, we always organize training for them. We draw our source persons from NEMA.
Structured training, it lasts for what period, for instance? A month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months?
The trainings lasts for 6 good weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Intensive trainings with simulations and drills. So at the end of it, they will now be inducted as volunteers. We give them the equipment, the kits, to be able to identify them when they are in disaster situations. Other responding agencies will be able to identify them that this person is from social institute, this one is from social institute or from social agency. So they will be able to identify them and give them role to play when disaster occurs. So we train them on CPR, first aid management, evacuation. Okay, so all those, so we train them on what to do and how to save individuals.
There's a critical aspect in all of this which we don't hear talked about most times in this country. Yes, people respond to victims of disasters, they provide immediate succor, they provide food, clothing, shelter, beddings, but there is an aspect which we see in other parts of the world, counselors, and we don't see that in great detail in this country. People who provide the psychological support, who counsel people who have been through the trauma of disasters. Now, Is your institute providing any such services?
Presently, for now, we are not, but we are looking at it because it's critical. Because at the end of when the disaster occurs, there will be loss of lives, loss of properties, economic loss, environmental losses, and all that. And those that suffer it, they are either traumatized or they face one emotional situation or the other. So we need, which we are looking at, to bring that to bear at our institute to see what we can do to counsel those people, to advise them and encourage them. Okay? Then see how they can also be back to their communities, how they can live again in their communities. Okay? And how they can bounce back. That is building resilience. How they can bounce back to their businesses or whatever they have been doing. Because once that is done, that will reduce that emotional pain, emotional torment they may be going through that period. So we are, as an institute, is also working on that presently.
Do you also have collaboration with international organizations?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, we have international partnership with Bournemouth University Disaster Management Center in UK. We have facilitated international training programs for the ministry. And we have also have a partnership with the International Emergency Management Society, as in Belgium, in the area of capacity building, then also in the area of certification, professional certification, giving our members that international certification as disaster managers, that they can present anywhere across the globe.
So for those you train, you also provide some certification that's acceptable in other parts of the world.
Yes.
Responders or managers of crisis situations and disasters.
Yes, we do that.
I suppose in engaging in all of this, one should ask the question really, how does the Institute source its funding? Because if you're organizing training programs, you're training people for 6 weeks, who pays for it?
There are some trainings that we do give as giving back to the society.
Yes, but again, you also need funding to carry out those trainings. You invite people who, you know, resource persons. There are logistics involved in all of that. So who takes care of that?
We do. We get most of our funding from membership dues.
Okay.
Our members, they do pay their membership dues. Then we also, when we're having programs like this too, we also reach out to organizations for support. So whatever support they give to us is put into that program. Okay? So those are the areas, apart from participation fee. When you participate in a program, you also pay participation fee for that program. So we get our resources, our funding from members' subscription payment, annual subscription payment, from support from organizations, then also from participation. Probably if it's a 5 days intensive training program, it may be 300,000 or whatever as the case may be. So they pay participation. Then there are also other programs that we do free. That they don't.
Well, you talked about some 5,000 plus members across the country.
Yes.
It's a very large country, Nigeria. So the question here is, how well spread out are you in the country, Nigeria? I mean, where is your presence felt? Lagos, Abuja, or Abuja, Kanu, or let's talk about that.
Yeah, Lagos. Our secretariat is in Lagos. Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. We are trying now to exploit Kano, Akwa Ibom, then Maiduguri.
What we're looking at here in the future with with a membership strength of 5,000, what would be the required strength for you to effectively impact society with the activities of training, risk management, crisis resolution, and peace building? What would you be looking at?
While looking at between 10,000 members as our target. We're targeting, because we're trying now to decentralize our programs and activities to various states. We have been, over the time, been in Lagos, Abuja, but what we're trying to do is to decentralize our programs and activities to other states, to also get them involved so that they can also benefit from our programs and activities.
Okay. And speaking about your collaboration with international bodies, you mentioned some foreign institutions. Any such affiliation with tertiary institutions in Nigeria, some of the universities, for instance?
Yeah. We are currently partnering with Center for Disaster Risk Management, University of Port Harcourt. Then we also have a Federal College of Education Technical, their consult. We also partner with them. We organize diploma, professional diploma, professional higher diploma programs in collaboration with the college.
Well, Chuksakao, you say your organization is just 8 years? Did you say 8 years?
Yes.
And so, are you daunted by the enormity of what you see in terms of disasters, crises in the country, the huge gap that needs to be breached, and looking at the future of this institute? Where would you like to see it?
We are not disturbed. We are committed to promoting and advancing disaster management. And most importantly, that have kept us going is the numerous endorsements that we have been getting. Presently, we are in partnership with National Authority on Chemical and Biological Weapon Conventions of the Office of the Secretary to the Federal Government. When we had our program in Port Harcourt, the Secretary to the Federal Government of the Federation was ably represented. So those things keep us going, in as much that we have challenges of funding here and there, but those things keep us going. And we remain focused and we are committed. And our target is getting the institute chartered.
Final note, you talked about creating awareness on how to address these things we talked about. But the institute itself would probably need to create more awareness. How much have you done about that, letting people know that such an organization exists for building of capacity? How much have you done?
We have been doing that, sir. You know, the challenge is funding. We need support. So that's why we are reaching out to various organizations, ministry, department, and agencies, and international donors to support us to be able to meet our mandate and meet our target. We are committed. We are out for it. There's no turning back.
Okay, well then, Chuks Akawo, DG Emergency, Crisis, and Disaster Risk Management Institute, we thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. And
thank you. I'm grateful.
The best in
thank you,
your
sir.
endeavors.
Thank you.
Right.
I'm grateful.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week we'll be back with One-on-One. I am Cyril Stover, and I say continue to stay safe.